Hi there, I'm Marla. My boss stole the Super Bowl tickets that were meant for me, a personal thank you from a client I worked day and night to secure. And by Monday morning, he was out, fired, his reputation shattered. But how did we get there? And what kind of quiet war unfolds in offices just like yours? Every single day. Have you ever had someone steal your credit, then smile to your face like nothing happened? Or been punished for speaking up while others got promoted for staying silent? What time are you watching this? And where are you tuning in from? Let me know in the comments. I'd really love to hear your story. The city blinked through frost-glazed glass, a skyline blurred by condensation and fluorescent fatigue. I sat in my office, palms wrapped around a lukewarm mug of coffee I'd reheated twice but never sipped. January in Chicago didn't bother me. What bothered me was the silence. The type that creeps in when everyone around you knows something you don't. I opened the quarterly performance report with the kind of anticipation I hadn't allowed myself in months. My team had crushed it. I'd led every pivot, every recalibration that turned a failing strategy into a flagship win. This was my moment, until it wasn't. My name wasn't there. I blinked, refreshed the file, scrolled. Strategic lead, Craig Delmore. A pinprick bloomed behind my eyes. I scanned the draft history. A previous version, archived in my local folder, had my name where it belonged. This version had been uploaded last night. Someone had gone in after hours and scrubbed me out. Not a mistake, not oversight, a decision. I didn't slam my laptop shut or storm Craig's office demanding answers. I'd learned that in this world, tantrums earn labels, and labels cost careers. I let the silence stretch, let the truth settle like a thin layer of ash over everything I'd built. Mid-morning, I passed the break room, pretending to need more coffee. I stopped short when I heard his voice through the half-closed door. Yeah, no need to list her. Just bundle it under my name. Keep things consistent. I didn't breathe, just stood there, steam curling from my forgotten mug, while Craig rewrote history over the phone with someone from admin like it was housekeeping. When he hung up, I turned and walked straight back to my desk. I opened a folder labeled Documented. It had sat empty since the day I created it, half out of cynicism, half out of hope I'd never need it. I dragged the original report into it, then the altered one, dated, time-stamped, indexed. I didn't need an audience. I needed evidence. 16 years ago, I stayed until midnight fixing a broken campaign at my first agency. My manager presented it the next day with my charts, my branding, my phrasing, and my absence. When I asked about credit, he smiled and said, "That's the job, sweetheart. You want glory? Be a client." That night, I cried in the supply closet. Today, I didn't cry. I printed the report, the version with Craig's name in bold where mine had been. I looked at the photo on my bookshelf, me and Sandra, my mentor, from the week before she passed. She once told me, "Don't fight fire with noise. Fight it with paper." The printer clicked. Pages slid out warm, the ink still wet enough to smear. I slipped them into a manila envelope, sealed it, and slid it beneath my drawer. "One piece at a time," I whispered. Back at my screen, a new report landed in my inbox, client-facing. I opened it. My name wasn't there either. I first heard about the meeting while walking back from the restroom. 2 junior associates were chatting near the elevator, one saying, "Big client update with Langley this morning. Craig's leading it solo." I stopped just long enough for it to sink in. I checked my phone. No invite, no email, nothing. Back at my desk, I opened the calendar system, heart starting to thump with a dull warning beat. There it was. Langley Q1 review, marked private, limited attendees. My name wasn't on the list. I pressed my lips together and walked over to Emily, the admin who manages meeting logistics. "Hey, was I supposed to be in the Langley meeting this morning?" I asked lightly. She blinked. "I thought you were. Craig said you'd be looped in separately." I thanked her and walked away before she could say more. 10 minutes later, Craig strolled past my office, coffee in hand, smugness carved into every step. He paused at the threshold and smiled like we were in on a secret. "Don't worry about this one," he said. "Just strategy level folks today." I forced a smile. "Right. Got it. He walked on. My fingers curled so tight around the mouse I nearly cracked the plastic. I reopened my folder labeled Langley Q4 Planning. Inside were hours, days of my models, revenue pathing scenarios, and contingency matrices. I'd carried that project from chaos to coherence, fought to regain Victor Langley's trust after a disastrous Q3. I was the reason the account didn't walk. And now I wasn't even in the room. I emailed IT for the most recent version of the presentation Craig submitted. I told them I was reviewing client prep alignment. They didn't ask questions. 5 minutes later, it landed in my inbox. I opened it and the blood drained from my face. Slide after slide, my language, my structure, my insights, reworded just enough to fit Craig's cadence. The header bore only his name. The executive summary began with, "After initial complications, Craig Delmore implemented a revised approach that stabilized the partnership." I didn't scream. I didn't breathe. He hadn't just taken my work. He'd rewritten the entire timeline. According to this deck, I'd never existed. The early missteps he blamed on resource misalignment, that was me. The win he credited to senior recalibration, that was me too. I stared at the screen, jaw locked, then hit print. Every page, color, bound, labeled, stored, filed. Later that afternoon, Naomi passed by my desk, dropping off a folder. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Meeting went okay. Nothing big." Of course it didn't. He'd already sculpted the narrative. There was nothing left to discuss. I remembered what he'd said that morning. Just strategy-level folks. It wasn't a line. It was a verdict. That night, the office thinned to a hum. I stayed, lights dimmed around me, surrounded by silence and cold printer toner. I opened the folder named Documented again, clicked, dragged, dropped. Then I stared at the screen and thought about what it meant to be rewritten by someone who never did the work. He was playing a long game, one where credit wasn't stolen, it was reassigned, sanitized, buried. But I had the drafts, the metadata, the emails, the receipts. If he was controlling the story, I was collecting the chapters. At 9:47 p.m., my phone buzzed with a system alert. Langley feedback summary uploaded. I opened it. It was written by Craig. The last line read, "Special thanks to the support team." No names. I closed the laptop and whispered, "Not this time." The request came in just before noon. A strategic outline for a potential merger pitch, due end of day. No subject line, no context. Just a forwarded message from Craig with 2 words, "Need by 5." There was no preamble, no "we'll review together," no hint of credit or collaboration. Just the assumption that I'd do it, like always. I didn't ask questions. I just got to work. The data came to life under my hands. Scenarios, risk spreads, exit strategies. By 7 p.m., my fingers ached, and the office had gone quiet. My name was nowhere on the document, and I hadn't added it. Not yet. Something stopped me. Maybe it was the way Craig's tone lingered from earlier that morning. "Just make it clean. I'll polish it up before it goes out." I stared at the header. No name, no author. I left it that way and saved a version to my encrypted drive. He didn't fire me. He diluted me. 2 days later, I stumbled across the final deck on the internal server. Craig had labeled it CONF Final Merger Pitch. I opened it, already bracing. The structure was mine, flawlessly lifted, slide order identical, charts modified slightly but based on the models I built from scratch. Even the bullet phrasing echoed my cadence. Except now, it said, "Lead Strategist, Craig Delmore." I sat back, breath shallow. I didn't move for a full minute. Then I checked the file metadata. Created by M. Broom. Modified by C. Delmore. There it was, a fingerprint, a timeline, a trail. I screenshot everything, saved it under a new directory, pattern A003. A number I picked not at random. It was the 3rd time he'd done this in less than 2 months. It wasn't ego. It was erasure. Not one win. systematic removal. Stealing work is theft. Rewriting history is war. 16 years ago, I watched my mentor present my thesis deck to a client boardroom full of gray suits and cold smiles. She didn't even glance at me. When I asked about it later, she laughed. "Welcome to the table, Marla. You're lucky to even be in the room." I told myself it was how the game worked, back then. But I hadn't clawed my way through 2 states, 4 firms, and 3 layoffs just to become a ghost behind someone else's name. I opened a new folder and titled it Craig Conflict Timeline. Inside, I logged every version, every email, every subtle theft masked as collaboration, dates, screenshots, not for vengeance, yet for truth, for preparation. At 9:12 that night, I reopened the screenshot of the merger file. The timestamps gleamed on the screen like silent witnesses. I hit print. The page slid out warm, a single sheet of proof. I grabbed a Sharpie from my drawer and wrote 3 words across the top. Exhibit A. The air in the open-floor conference room was different that morning. Heavier. Still. Not the usual Monday rush of chatter and laptop taps, just tight-lipped glances and the kind of silence that settles before a storm. Craig was already seated, unusually upbeat, cracking a joke I didn't catch. I slid into my chair, noting how people avoided looking in my direction. I felt it in my gut. Something was coming. The moment arrived halfway through the sync. I was giving a routine update on cross-departmental alignment when Craig cut in. "I'll stop you there, Marla," he said, smiling like it was nothing. I blinked, mid-sentence. "I've reviewed your outline," he continued. "There's some real concern about cohesion. It feels misaligned with company objectives." I stared at him. "And frankly," he added, "we can't afford emotionally reactive planning. This quarter needs leadership, not improvisation." The room held its breath. I looked around. Not a single face met mine. Even Naomi kept her head down. I said nothing, not because I didn't have a response, but because I knew that anything I said would become ammunition. Craig was setting the stage, and I wasn't going to hand him the script. He moved on like it hadn't happened. The meeting closed with polite clapping and empty stares. Back at my desk, Naomi appeared with a file she didn't need to deliver. "Don't take it personally," she whispered. "He's just under pressure." I smiled, didn't say a word. Inside, something coiled tighter than it had before. Rage, yes, but also clarity. You don't humiliate someone like that unless you're scared of them. Later that afternoon, Naomi slipped a sticky note under my keyboard. "He's been talking to upper execs. Says you're unstable, that you're spiraling." My chest constricted. My thoughts blurred. I stared at the words. He was using my past against me. 3 years ago, after my divorce, I'd taken 2 weeks off. Told Craig the truth. Panic attacks, sleepless nights, therapy. He'd nodded then, even said, "Good for you, owning it." And now, he was feeding it back to the board like poison disguised as concern. This wasn't sabotage. It was an execution plan. I opened the folder in my drawer, the one marked Documented. I logged the time of the meeting, Craig's exact words, Naomi's note. I pulled Craig's performance memo from last year, his glowing praise of my clear-headed leadership in crisis. I made a copy, labeled it Contradiction Number 1. Then I began a new document, a psychological timeline. Not for court, not yet. But for the moment someone finally asked why I hadn't spoken up sooner. "If he wants war," I muttered, "he'll get a dossier." I stayed until past 7, refining the timeline, adding screenshots of internal Slack messages he'd copied me out of, compiling inconsistencies. As I packed up, I passed Craig near the elevators. He smiled. "No hard feelings, right?" I met his eyes. "Only facts, Craig. Just facts." I stepped into the elevator, and for the first time, I felt like I wasn't walking alone. The hallway was dim, muffled by the quiet hush of a late Thursday afternoon. I wasn't supposed to be there. Technically, I was heading to grab a folder I'd accidentally left in the resource room. But as I passed Craig's office, I froze. The glass wall was frosted just enough to blur outlines, not words. His voice came low, crisp, rehearsed. She's becoming a liability. We'll need to start redirecting projects. Manage her out before Q2. I didn't move. She needs to feel busy but boxed in. Make her believe she's valued. Drown her in initiatives that won't go anywhere. I backed away slowly. My heart didn't pound. It throbbed, slow, surgical beats. I returned to my office and shut the door. I sat still for several minutes, then opened my notebook and began writing. Not thoughts, transcripts, verbatim, word for word. I wasn't being paranoid. I was being hunted. The next morning, Naomi dropped a post-it beneath my keyboard. Her handwriting was tight and sharp. Meet me in the stairwell. 5 minutes later, she appeared at the service door, eyes darting down the hall. You're not the first, she whispered. There were 2 others. One transferred, the other disappeared. Burnout, maybe. No one talks about it. What happened? He did the same thing, praised them until no one was watching, then rewrote their endings. My mind clicked into motion. I remembered Angela from marketing. She led a record-breaking campaign, then took extended leave. Never came back. Another, Diana, was shuffled from project to project until she was phased out of relevance. They'd called it natural attrition. That night, I stayed late. I accessed the internal HR archive. Memos, bulletins, old performance evaluations. The language was identical. Over-assertive. Lacks emotional stability. Inconsistent alignment. I copied each phrase into a table. Then I added mine. They matched, almost verbatim. I printed everything, stamped each record with a date and signature. I backed up every file twice, one to a drive, one to the cloud. It wasn't just personal, it was protocol. I looked at the photo pinned beside my monitor, me on my first day at Bressler, smiling too wide, clutching a coffee I hadn't even finished. That version of me had hope. Naive, maybe, but hope. Now, I had a ledger and a strategy. Craig had a playbook. I was going to burn it. I opened a new folder, named it Case Study, Repetition and Retaliation, Bressler and Kent. Inside, I placed every time-stamped conversation, every plagiarized slide, every subtle erasure. Then I opened my notebook and wrote 6 words. One more incident, and I go public. The pen tip tore the page. The latest performance update dropped at 6:42 p.m. Craig's name, of course, took center stage. My section was folded into team efforts. I closed the file, leaned back, let the glow of the screen wash over my face like a slow burn. I opened my inbox and scrolled past logistics, calendar invites, compliance reminders, until I found the last message I'd sent to Victor Langley, dated 3 weeks ago. I hovered over reply. Then I didn't reply. Instead, I clicked compose. Thank you again for the Super Bowl tickets. Just wanted to say I never received them. Hope to catch up soon. I read the words 3 times. I wasn't accusing anyone. I wasn't naming names. But silence had gotten me nowhere. I sent it from my personal email. My hand hovered over the trackpad before I clicked send. A beat passed. Then I sent it. I exhaled. No thunder. No crash. Just the sound of my own breathing, steady for the first time in days. He replied in under 5 minutes. What do you mean? I sent them to you directly. Who took them? I stared at the screen, the cursor blinking like it was waiting for permission. Not sure, just that they never reached me. I hit send again. Then another ping. Leave this with me. I blinked. That was it. 5 words, cold, clipped, and absolutely loaded. The following morning, Craig walked in, humming something tuneless. By 9 a.m., a company-wide email hit. Super Bowl gift clarification, internal note. The email was long, padded, carefully vague. The client tickets were received and reassigned as a corporate gift. There was internal misunderstanding around ownership. He never used my name. He never needed to. I was the ghost again, this time, blamed in advance for a fire I didn't start. He CC'd Victor. I read it twice, screenshot it, forwarded it to my private folder, labeled it Preemptive Spin, Exhibit C. Later, I walked into Craig's office with a hard copy of a draft. He smiled up at me. All good? I nodded. My smile was thinner than paper. All good. As I turned to leave, his voice followed me. Appreciate how you've handled things. Shows maturity. I kept walking. You lie in daylight, I build in shadows. That night, just after 8 o'clock, my system buzzed with a new meeting alert. Subject, client review, Langley Partners. Time, Monday, 9:30 a.m. Location, executive boardroom required attendees, Craig Delmore, Marla Broom, Victor Langley, Andrea Granger, VP of Ethics. I closed my laptop, let the countdown begin. The office was quieter than usual, and that alone told me everything. No chatter from the break room, no footsteps pacing down the carpeted aisles. Just the hum of the HVAC and the low rumble of something waiting to rupture. I arrived early. My folder was already on the table. Email logs, expense receipts, client messages, each one labeled, color-coded, cross-referenced. This wasn't defense, it was precision. At 9:30, my screen flashed the reminder, Client Review, Langley Partners. Craig strolled past my desk a minute later, sunglasses still on from his return flight. He held a cup of overpriced coffee like it was a trophy. Let's make moves today, he said, smiling. I didn't respond. In the boardroom, the glass walls felt colder than usual. Craig sat at the head of the table like a king awaiting applause. Victor Langley entered next. No small talk, no handshake. Behind him, Andrea Granger stepped in and closed the door behind her. Her badge read, VP, Corporate Ethics, Victor began. Marla, did you enjoy the game? I met his eyes. I wasn't there. Craig straightened in his seat. Victor didn't blink. That's odd. I sent 2 front-row Super Bowl tickets to you, directly. Craig interjected, too fast. There was a mix-up. I reassigned them as a strategic gesture. Thought it would benefit the firm long-term. Andrea clicked her pen. Victor leaned forward. Who did you take? Craig faltered. An investor. Potential partner. Victor looked to Andrea. She lifted a single sheet of paper. Hotel receipts, flights, all billed to the company, and you listed the guest as Ryan Delmore, your brother-in-law. Craig froze. It was still a business opportunity. Victor's voice dropped, slow and lethal. You used a corporate reward, meant as a personal thank you to an employee who earned it, and turned it into a weekend joyride with a family member. Andrea added, that constitutes breach of ethical code and misappropriation of client-designated property. Craig tried again. This is a misunderstanding. We can resolve this internally. No, Victor cut in. You don't get to rewrite this story. Andrea closed the folder. Effective immediately, your access is suspended pending full review. Craig's mouth opened, then closed. He reached for his badge, hesitated, then ripped it off and tossed it on the table. The plastic clacked louder than anyone expected. He looked at me, searching for anything, regret, fear, mercy. I didn't flinch. You erased me from the report. I erased you from the board. As I left the room, heads turned. One of the junior analysts muttered, finally. By the elevators, Naomi stood with her arms crossed. He won't be the last, she said. I said nothing. Just pressed the button and waited for the doors to slide shut behind me. Power didn't need to be loud. It just needed to be permanent. When I got back to my desk, a new email lit up the screen. Subject, Private HR Review. Immediate response requested. From Craig, I smirked. Of course he wouldn't go down without trying to take me with him. Less than an hour after Craig's badge hit the boardroom table, a meeting request landed in my inbox. Subject, immediate attendance required from HR compliance. I didn't flinch. I'd expected it. The walls in Denise's office were always too clean, too polite. She gestured for me to sit. Her voice tried to sound neutral, but even she couldn't hide the discomfort in her eyes. Craig has submitted a formal grievance, she said. He's alleging client manipulation and breach of confidentiality. Of course he is. I slid a folder across the desk. Inside, printouts of every relevant email, time-stamped logs, calendar invites, Slack messages, even the draft where he changed metadata tags on my work. She flipped through it slowly, then closed the file without comment. If you need corroboration, I'm ready, I said. But if you're looking for doubt, I won't beg. I stood, She didn't stop me. By 7 p.m., I was back in my apartment, phone face down on the table, untouched glass of wine sweating beside it. I hadn't turned on the lights. The city outside flickered through the blinds, like it couldn't decide whether to cheer or whisper. My phone rang. Victor. "It's done," he said. "He won't recover from this, but that's not why I'm calling." I waited. "I want to offer you something. Executive Director of Strategy at Langley. You'd report to no one but me. Double your current compensation, autonomy, no politics." I sat in silence, not out of shock, out of clarity. "They promoted you because they had to," he said. "I'm offering this because you earned it." I didn't answer right away. The next morning, a legal envelope waited at my office door. Craig had filed civil action against the company and named me. Defamation, emotional distress, career sabotage. Inside, my inbox swelled with curiosity, thinly disguised as concern. Coworkers who hadn't said a word in weeks now sent emojis, side-eye reactions, or worse, radio silence. Eyes followed me in the hallway like I was contagious. I stood at the window and watched traffic slither through cold streets. "I'm done defending myself in a place that never protected me," I said to no one. I called Victor. "Send contract." I printed my resignation letter on company paper, folded it twice, carried it to HR without a word. Denise met me outside her office. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. I handed her the letter. She nodded. Nothing soft, nothing cruel, just the acknowledgement between two people who'd seen enough. I packed my things in silence. No goodbyes, no handshakes. I didn't owe closure to anyone who only noticed me when the office politics shifted. That night I sat on my couch, contract signed, wine still untouched. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. Text. "You think you've won. This isn't over." I stared at it for a beat. Deleted it. "Maybe not," I whispered, "but you're no longer my problem." 12 months later, I didn't feel like I won. I felt like I outgrew the war. My name was etched on the glass door of a new office, 4 floors higher than the one I left. The skyline stretched wide beyond my windows, gold-tipped and unapologetic. My team moved with confidence, not fear, and for the first time in my career, I didn't need to look over my shoulder. But some mornings, the echo of it all still found me. It didn't ache. It just arrived. Softly, like a breath I hadn't released. That boardroom, that smirk, that final smirk. I brushed it away and flipped through quarterly figures. Double the clients, triple the autonomy. No one had to validate my work anymore. I had become the validation. A ping from my phone. Naomi, still at the startup, still Naomi. Her last message read, "You didn't just take him down, you changed how we see ourselves." I smiled, then tucked the phone away. 16 years ago, I'd sat at a cubicle that didn't even have my name on the nameplate. I watched my work presented by others, my voice reduced to footnotes and supporting materials. I thought that was how the world worked. Maybe it was, back then. Now? Now I had my own nameplate, and people knew who built what. But ghosts have long arms. That afternoon, legal forwarded a new notice. Craig was suing again. Wrongful termination, defamation, emotional distress. My name was in the second paragraph. I didn't get angry. I didn't even sigh. I just closed the email and turned back to my team's progress deck. He was still trying to fight a battle I had already walked away from. That night, I sat across from a woman half my age, bright, anxious, brilliant. She was part of the mentorship program I'd agreed to join. Her name was Elise. "He said I was too intense in meetings," she told me. I started wondering if I imagined it. "No," I said, sliding a folder across the table. "You're not." She opened it. Inside, templates, documentation tips, and a label across the cover. "Your work deserves a name." Her eyes widened. "You really did all this?" I leaned in. "Let me show you how to fight without screaming." Back in my apartment, I pulled out a small white envelope from my bottom drawer. Inside, 1 Super Bowl ticket, folded, unused, still crisp. I didn't keep it as a trophy. I kept it as a warning. In my journal, I wrote a single line. Justice wasn't the moment he was fired. It was the moment I stopped needing permission to be seen. My phone buzzed again. Naomi. You saw the news? I typed back. He's chasing ghosts. I'm building legacies. I closed the journal, looked out the window, and began planning what came next. If there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that silence doesn't protect you. It prepares you. I used to believe that if I worked hard enough, the right people would notice. But what I've come to understand is this. Visibility isn't something you wait for. It's something you claim. We all reach a point where we have to stop asking to be seen and start demanding space. Not through rage, through proof, through persistence, through knowing your worth even when others try to erase it. Have you ever been overlooked for something you clearly earned? Or watched someone else take credit for your work? How did you handle it? I'd love to hear your story. If this video spoke to your heart, drop a 1 in the comments or let me know where you're watching from. If you didn't like it, tell me why. I'm listening. And if you want more stories like this, ones that dig deep and speak real truth, hit that subscribe button so you never miss what's next. Your voice matters here. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise.